As new and innovative house plans demanded cost-effective solutions, there was a relaxing of rules around building materials. Many new products introduced to the New Zealand market were actually untried in New Zealand conditions, and despite even having brands appraisals, actually failed in service. Part of that cause of failure was the complicated instructions that weren't necessarily followed by builders. And ultimately, those products just end up on the demolition heap. I've come to talk to Peter Burkhout, the CEO of Brands, the Building Research Association of New Zealand. Do you think Brands got it wrong?
I don't think specifically Brands got it wrong, but I think we were part of an industry that wasn't thinking systemically about how you use products. And so by the end of the 90s, we were just getting far too innovative, far too out there for the New Zealand climate, for the New Zealand building industry.
And to compound the problems, we switched to untreated timber, which might have been fine, except it relied on buildings being totally weathertight, which they weren't. This is Phil O'Sullivan, the guy who first blew the whistle on leaky homes in the late 90s. He found untreated framing timber, approved and introduced earlier that decade, rotting in houses all over Auckland.
We'll never know probably the true cost.
Phil says the introduction of untreated timber was pushed hard by one company.
Carter Holt saw the opportunity, managed through a great deal of determination and influence, and using the weakness in the standards process to get the standard changed so that a small amount of untreated timber could be used, which, once they got it through, it flooded the market.
What was their motivation?
Money, basically.
So you're saying Carter Holt were one of the prime movers behind
They were
this?
the prime mover,
Yeah, they were the prime mover.
They were, there's no one else, yeah. Yeah, other people followed them, but they were the prime mover, yeah.
Via an Official Information Act request, we obtained documents dating back to the early 90s, and particularly letters and emails exchanged between the Building Industry Authority, the BIA, and Carter Holt Harvey. Clearly, Carter Holt Harvey were lobbying for a change to the timber standards to enable them to introduce kiln-dried untreated timber into the New Zealand market. And yet, the BIA were facing severe opposition from the industry and from the territorial authorities. It was identified in a letter that the architect for the BIA sent to Carter Holt Harvey. Builders being the conservative lot they are, I suspect I will have more irate or disbelieving phone calls, so any ammunition would be appreciated. And yet the BIA still went ahead and approved untreated timber. We approached the BIA's architect at the time. While she refused a formal interview, she did have this to say.
I was doing a job, it was my responsibility as the technical advisor to look into it. All the indications were that it was going to work. I wasn't the only, I mean, it's not my responsibility, it's the authority's responsibility, so you should be talking to them.
The authority no longer exists. It was dissolved in 2004 and absorbed by the Department of Building and Housing. We've made a number of attempts to get an interview with the CEO of the Department of Building and Housing, because clearly there are a number of questions that need to be put to her. She has refused to be interviewed by me on this subject. But those documents were going in both directions, and Guy Kavanagh was Carter Holt Harvey's marketing engineer at the time. His is a name that appears often on the Carter's site.
Hello.
Hello, Guy. There's no one left at Carter's who had anything to do with campaigning for the acceptance of untreated timber. Guy's now retired but remembers the time. Was it profit-driven?
Yeah, well, I guess it was a competitive market, and, you know, if something was going to cost a fortune, the building industry wasn't going to buy it.
In hindsight, was it a mistake now to use, or allow the use of untreated timber?
In hindsight, there were a whole lot of mistakes, including that one.
Even though it's a long time ago, I think Carter Holt Harvey deserves a chance to comment. So I'm calling Rob Davies, the present CEO.
Unfortunately, Rob's still in his meeting. He's not due out probably for another hour or so. But I can certainly pass your message on.
We really wanted to give Carter Holt Harvey an opportunity to put their side of the story in defence of some of those accusations that have been made.
No, I will definitely make sure the message gets through to him.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Rob has never called us back. Well, we'll wait his call. And our emails go unheeded.
Prior to the use of untreated kiln-dried timber, basically all timber that was used on site was wet and treated wet and arrived on site wet and heavy, and took months to dry out, and there were inherent problems, peaking and popping of line ends, etc. And so it was concluded that untreated kiln-dried timber would provide a much better result.
Is there anything inherently wrong with untreated timber?
Not in an ideal world, but the trouble is we don't live or operate or build in an ideal world. And certainly if moisture could be kept 18% or less, then it would be fine. In furniture, but not in houses.
Perhaps the most obvious place where things have the potential to go wrong is during construction. Not only were the new supposedly weathertight claddings being used, but claddings were fixed directly onto untreated timber with no cavity to allow water to escape. When you came to be buying the house, what sort of due diligence did you do to protect yourselves?
We asked some specific questions. We asked, was it built with a cavity system? Yes. Was it built with treated timber? Yes. Have you ever had any problems with it? An emphatic and rather annoyed no, never.
None of those statements were true?
None.
So you were totally misled at that point?
The cavity is partly true because the bottom story does have a cavity, the top doesn't.
The person that Colin and Diane have a strong claim against is the builder-developer. His method is typical of many cases we see. Build a house, live in it for a while, sell it to build another one, and so on. And that makes him a bit difficult to track down. Hello, I'm just sorry to disturb you. We were just looking for Mr. David Chapman at this address, and obviously he doesn't live here anymore. Thank you. Yeah. Bye. Oh, the gate's closed. We've got another address in another new suburb.
Hello?
Hi, is that Mrs. Chapman?
Yes.
Hi, it's Sean Gray speaking. I'm just wondering if your husband's at home today.
Just one moment, please.
Property, please.
Sorry?
Property, please.
Okay. We just wanted to talk to you about the leaky homes issues, Mr. Chapman.
Sorry, just goodbye.
You don't want to talk to us?
No intention of talking to you.
In relation to the Harris house?
In anything.
Why?
Goodbye.
But you're responsible for developing that property, which has been demolished. The Weathertight Homes Tribunal found that in the 7 years prior to building Diane and Colin's home, the Chapmans had purchased 3 other sections, built a home on them and sold them. David Chapman was also the person in control of the consent, design, construction and approval and ultimately the marketing process of the home. He therefore owed a duty of care to Colin and Diane and was found to have breached that. Although Mr. Chapman didn't want to talk to us, he has since been ordered by the tribunal to pay the full $750,000 that was claimed. We have hundreds of similar cases where builder-developers say they were building a house for themselves to live in. But if you do that over and over again, you're a developer and you owe a duty of care to the next owner.